Welcome to another episode of our Midweek conversation at First Baptist Sweetwater, where we strive to be the first responders of God's love. My name is Jerry Hendricks. We're in Studio
A.
And I'm here with my good friend Teek Hamilton.
Hi, Jerry.
Teek, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing good.
We had a party last night.
We had a little party.
And it was a good party.
I was just talking to the two girls who are hanging out with me this week. They were not at the party, but they were at the location of the party.
Right.
And apparently when they got there, they were told you can't sit there because there's a party of 80 people. And they went, who has a party of 80 people? And then when we saw you, we're like, Teek has a party of 80 people.
Of course he does.
So
it was a great time. We officially wrapped up the softball season
right
with awards
Yep.
and pizza.
Coach Moore has already set the first practice of 2022.
Oh, my goodness.
So we're geared up and ready to go. Still got room for people to join, though.
Oh, well, I forget who I was talking to, but we were talking about if we're going to add a second team, we were going to need some more players, but I go, that's no problem for Teek.
Yeah, we can find more. We're already recruiting. In fact, if you want to play, come play with us.
That's true. Well, and then this morning as I get here, you're telling me about trying to recruit someone after church on Sunday.
Right. Yeah.
No, not trying to recruit.
I was recruiting. And they knew I was, so that's good.
So anyways.
They understand the importance of being on the team.
Well, it was a fun season.
Mm-hmm.
We, I don't know. I mean, it's just a crazy thing how our church has kind of gotten into this and made it our thing for the fall. But a great fellowship around the stuff on the field.
I was about to say, and I ran multiple tables yesterday.
Yeah, it was crazy. I intentionally got there late so that the pizza would already be all out. Well, it was about half gone when I got there.
Yeah, Biggs was on the ball. They had them. They were as we were getting there. They were bringing them all out. They didn't have any place to put all the pizzas. They just had to start putting them on tables. But 27 pizzas will do that to you.
Sort of noticed that, yeah. Well, we're in our next Sunday will be our last Sunday in the book of James. And this week we'll be talking about prayer.
Nice.
But it has been interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally in the series we've done, not so much book series,
right?
But a lot of them topical, where the topic is sort of captures a person, and then the conversation is fueled from that. Mm-hmm. This one's a little different because it's been all in the book of James,
right?
Pretty consolidated book in the Bible. But it seems as if it's generated a good bit of talk.
It has, and we've talked a little bit about why that is and what people are saying. And I wondered if whenever you hear someone talk about New Testament, it's either I love Jesus in the Gospels or I love Paul. Mm-hmm. Rarely does anybody, or I'll say I've never heard somebody say I really love the epistles. Never heard that I remember, and so I think people don't spend a lot of time in those, and so just spending time in them has generated conversation, got people excited about it. And there's a lot of practical, everyday advice that really speaks to the American Christian church.
Well, I think that's what has generated a lot of the conversation, is that it's a very practical book.
Right.
It's not so specific to a local congregation like Paul's writings were.
Right. A
lot of time, and so you're trying to make some comparisons and learn from somebody else's experiences. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those were not good experiences.
Right.
We're reading sort of his scolding to a congregation. But this one's just been very helpful. I'll say helpful. It's not so much that it has covered some of the disciplines, but it really zeroes in on the idea that our faith is a matter of our actions.
Right. Which, when you put that against Paul would be worried that you might take that too far and think that your actions save you. But James would say, no, your actions prove you're saved, that you're a follower of Jesus.
Right. And so topically, he's kind of gone from one thing to the next, and that, as our conversation has as well. And we've kind of highlighted some of those things that we talk about in faith that I think this Sunday what I was trying to get at, or I think where we were getting, was ultimately the real faith kind of actions starts to become noticed by the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And I think that before, and as I thought about faith in my life generationally, through different periods of ministry where you kind of saw certain shifts in our culture and in the world, we're at a place right now that's, to me, is just a very, very interesting place. And I think the way that we win people by our actions might be different than what we have suspected.
Right. True faith is counterculture, especially right now.
Well, and
if you live it out.
And so it seems that our culture, not Christian culture, but all culture in general right now has a strong tendency to pile on in the area of hatred.
Yes.
And it's become frustrating.
It's become frustrating because Christians join into that. And so we look like culture.
That's what I was going to say.
We don't look counterculture.
Is that we're starting to see, and we have ways to see it now that we didn't 20 years ago.
Right.
So we have ways to see our Christian friends jumping into this culture of anger and hatred and finger pointing. And you want to think that there's no better time for believers to be noticed by their love.
Right.
And then we've said, and I think that part applied to every generation.
Right.
But right now, it's not that hard. But we've got to dial it back.
Yeah, because even if you were to point it out, the defensive mechanism of every Christian is, well, you do this. Well, that's, we're trying to talk about holding each other accountable. Don't become defensive in it when someone points out, hey, you look a lot like a secular world.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing is that it is a deep rabbit hole.
Yeah.
That's
a movie reference. Well done.
So last week I was in the Metroplex. Got there.
That's Dallas-Fort Worth area for our international listeners.
Correct. I was in Richardson, Texas, specifically. North Dallas, I guess. Northwest a bit Dallas. And so I got there. I drove over Monday morning, got there for my first lunch at noon. But it wasn't until Tuesday morning. I'm going to my next meeting, a Tuesday morning meeting, so I've got some traffic, some work traffic. And I realized I've got to get aggressive here. Because driving in the Metroplex is different than driving in Sweetville.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about just the frustration of that, the way that I tend to speak to the traffic.
Okay.
And then so when I'm driving home on Wednesday, I got thinking about those different scenarios and thinking of, the message and being wise in a world that differentiates itself from the rest of the world. And that rabbit hole went pretty deep pretty fast for me because I'm a pretty vocal person. And I don't know if you knew this, Teague, but I can even be critical sometimes.
I've never noticed that in you. Maybe that just means I'm not listening. I don't know. But no, I think if we live out that following Jesus and what James says, we will look different. And when you talk, and maybe that's why it's so radical, we'll be known by our love. Nobody is known by love. Like, that's not what you see regularly. I mean, there are definitely good deeds and things like that. But if we lived out a lifestyle of love regularly, we would look totally different. And people want to be a part of that. You don't want to hang around the person who's always chewing on you and being a punk to you. You don't want to hang around the person who's making fun of you or making comments at your expense. You want to hang out with the person who builds you up, who loves you, who treats you like a human created in the image of God.
Yeah.
And if more churches did that, if more Christians did that, I bet we'd see an explosion in attendance.
Well, and I think it's one of those things that is going to ultimately be a little more frustrating because that kind of witness, in many ways, we used to refer to it, we used to say that there are no silent witnesses. But this is almost a silent witness because we're shutting up. We're shutting down some of this aggressive hatred kind and angry, I just call it angry, I guess, kind of behavior. And I think it takes, in that context, it may take longer to be noticed, but it really does eventually come across as authentic and genuine.
Right. I think sometimes we're more worried about whether someone wears a hat indoors or whether someone dresses a certain way than we are how we speak to people. And so I think that's part of why James talks about the tongue being untamed. we feel for some reason, once the words are out, you can't put them back in.
Right.
I can always take my hat off.
Right.
But I think that's part of it for us, that we worry about the wrong things. And we worry, like, words cut. You might be offended at how a person dresses or what they do. But words cut, and you can't take those back.
Yeah, and with the way that our world is wired with different media presentations, the piling on just happens so quickly. And I think that, and we've talked so much, and I think people are aware that what you put out there in those media outlets is your witness.
Right.
But we still just don't filter that very well.
No, I was on I'm in a lot of groups on Facebook, but one of them was one for youth ministers and ministers. And someone had shared a video of a speaker who's nationally known. He was a big name when you and I were younger in youth ministry, and he was big about youth ministry, but now he's changed, and now he ends up spending more time attacking other Christians as you're not being biblical, from his platform. And someone shared that video and said, I remember when he spent more time loving a lost world than he did chewing up the ones who are trying to love the lost world.
Yeah.
And I was like, how much could that be said about an everyday Christian or everyday follower of Jesus? I remember when they loved a lost world and tried to seek and save that lost world instead of attacking the ones who are doing that.
Right. And I think the encouragement through the most recent study is that we have to take those things and let them start to work their way through us. Because I do think it does take some time. Accountability, you mentioned that word. I think that's going to be important to that process. But it's going to take a while for us to really start to listening to a lost world rather than just judging them first. Right. And the subtleties of the difference in the things that we're judging against are, it's a lot more subtle in today's culture than maybe issues that we were facing 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it has to do with thoughts and popular opinion and things like that. Things that probably matter more than whether a person's wearing a hat in church.
Right. Yeah. It's become a which side are you on?
Right.
But rarely is it Jesus' side. That's not an option. Yeah. It's are you on the left? Are you on the right? Are you Republican, Democrat? Are you pro this or pro that? Are you pro against? It's never are you living out Jesus.
Well, I think what we're seeing is that we're really forcing people into divisiveness because we're pretty much with the way groupings go, requiring that people align.
Right.
And it's become harder for, and I don't know, you're right, Christians ought to be aligning with Jesus and not assuming that a certain thought pattern in the world is aligning with Jesus.
Right.
That there's going to be really some hard lines, I think, for us to kind of draw for ourselves and to learn from in these next few years. So
when we put Jesus in one of our categories, we've created Jesus in our image, not us in Jesus' image.
Right, and I think probably from Sunday, maybe the most difficult was understanding that Jesus was a peacemaker.
Yep.
And he said those who are identified as peacemakers are the children of God.
Yep.
That's a pretty strong lesson right there.
Yep. And already there are people who will hear that and they'll say, but no, there's no but. You can't add to it.
I reread Jesus' words.
There was no but.
And there wasn't one.
There was no but.
No. He went on. In fact, he went on into some other difficult sayings as well.
But
anyways, well, hey, this has been good to talk about this series and to think about this next Sunday. The message from James is on prayer, and I think that's will be a helpful one for us as we wrap this up and start to move into the next seasons in our life and in our church. We're having a good time here, and we look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
See you then.